Hey everybody, Jared Sebesta here. We're going to get right to the show today titled Passing Wealth to the Next Generation. What you're going to hear today is audio from a webinar with Ben Taatjes where he gives you the exact roadmap so you can begin the process of stewarding your financial resources in the most honorable and impactful way. This is part one. We'll have part two next week. Enjoy. All right. I would like to get started right now, and I'd like to introduce Ben Taatjes. He's the owner and CEO of Taatjes Financial Group. He's joining us on the call today. And Ben, let's just get things started here with respect to perhaps the topic here today. You've been in business for 20 years. What are some things that you've seen change in this business in the last 2 decades?
Yeah, Jared. So, number one, I think what hasn't changed is probably the best question. I think it's been incredible watching the business unfold. I mean, 20 years is a long time. I can remember starting with just myself in this little office, and a lot of the things that I remember doing back then, I don't do anymore today. We learn from mistakes. We learn from experience, and I feel like what has stayed the same is relationships with clients, asking great questions. And I think what's really probably stayed the same is that the importance of understanding a client situation, asking the right questions to get at what their real problem is and how we can help them, that stayed the same. Investment options have changed and different things, but that has stayed constant the entire time. And that's kind of what today we're be talking about.
Yeah, again, we titled this 20 years of retirement planning wisdom wrapped up into a 3-question process. We got to this topic because you have mentioned in the past on our radio shows, podcasts, and us just chatting that you've seen people get off track where I don't want to say they overthink it, but maybe they get focused on the wrong things because they're not being asked the proper questions. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, I think one thing that our industry is very good at is confusing people. And most of that comes from asking the wrong questions. It is complex, and I never want to make it sound as if what we're doing isn't complex and there's a lot of moving pieces to it. It is, but at the heart of what we should be doing is simplifying and solving problems, helping people understand. Yeah, I've got a heart of a teacher. I've been a Dave Ramsey fan since the very beginning. We're one of his endorsed local providers, but one of the things he says is have a heart of a teacher. And I take that to heart, I guess. I want people that we work with to understand. One of the things that I used to like to hear people say is, "Oh, Ben, we just trust you. We just trust you." And I used to think, "Oh, that's great. I want your trust." But that's not always good. We need a level of understanding. We need clients to understand through our education really what they have, the risk properties. They need to understand the overall financial picture. Yes, let us deal with the details. Let us get down into the minutia of the plan. But clients should understand and not only trust. We want to earn their trust over time, obviously, but we do have to have some level of understanding.
Yeah, exactly. And again, when it comes to this particular piece, stewardship, we all agree that at the heart level, retirees, they want to do this and they want to do it. They want to do it well. And again, what we're trying to get at here with this webinar is to give you a very simple plan, like Ben mentioned, just 3 questions. And again, I'm a fan of this particular information because if you answer these 3 questions, you're going to be on the right track. And this is kind of how you can take everything that Ben has learned in the last 20 years and apply it to your own life, your own retirement, and your own assets and ways to pass them on. Ben, just talk about that a little bit. Like, talk about just even the heart behind the people that you've met. We have great clients here. We attract great clients, and really they have a heart of generosity, don't they?
Yeah, that's probably one of my favorite things I do. Is getting able to assist in the stewardship. I think our newest, and we've changed our mission statement a little bit, but really now it's more of we're here to assist clients and families to better steward the resources God's given them. And at the end of the day, if I can do that, I've done my job really, really well. So with that message comes, we do end up helping a lot of people that are generous, that are looking at their wealth as if it is not necessarily theirs. They look at things a little differently. We say, okay, I'm holding on loosely with what I have. It's a different mindset probably than what some financial professionals might talk about with, hey, with what you have. God owns it all. We start there. We say, okay, how am I best stewarding these assets, both now for ourselves, but also for future generations.
Yeah, that's a great point. So we're going to talk about three major questions here today, and that's where the bulk of the information on this webinar is going to come from. So Ben, let's just get started with question one of three. What is it? And let's dive in.
Yeah, it sounds almost too simple, guys, but I think we all need a starting point. And that starting point is, what am I stewarding? That's a very simple first question. But really what we're after there is not necessarily just, yeah, I've got a little money here in the 401k and I want you to help. We want help there. Usually it looks at a full capital allocation strategy. So we look across all asset classes. And the best example I have is, a client who comes to us and they've got a farm or a small business. They've got their 401k. They've got maybe a little bit of land. Maybe they've got gold, silver, whatever these assets might be. We need to know the total of everything they have, how it's titled, right? So we know how is the actual ownership title of each and everything that they have, but also, what are the risk properties to that asset? So it's not uncommon that I'll meet with somebody and they will be looking at their 401k as this nest egg over here. And they'll say, well, I've got this certain allocation that I want. I want 60-40 stocks, bonds, maybe a little gold, whatever it is. But they forget to look at, they've got this really, really safe asset over here in real estate or gold or land or a farm asset or business. We have to look at everything together in one picture. So it's usually that looks like a summary of a really, really detailed balance sheet that we put together, where we know all risk return properties. And this is the other piece, the goal of each of those assets that you're stewarding.
Do you find it, maybe, I don't want to say surprising, but like it seems like a very simple place to start, like literally, like, what do you have? Are you surprised as to sometimes how people come in and they maybe don't really have, I don't want to say a clue, but they don't have a really solid grasp as to what they actually own?
Yeah, it's not surprising anymore because I've seen it enough where it's like, yeah, I've got a little here, got a little there, and all of a sudden we'll have this surprise asset pop up, right? And it doesn't surprise me anymore because people, as they've grown, they've got a little account over here and there and there. Things change over time. People lose track of why they invested in something in the beginning. They lose track of the goal of the asset. They lose track of even sometimes where the money is or that asset is. So no, it doesn't surprise me. I think we need to just, every time we meet with somebody, go down to verifying every asset, how it's titled. And by the way, guys, if you have that document or that balance sheet that we create, you're well on your way to a great meeting with an attorney to really set up an estate plan or wealth transfer plan. So we use a software called eMoney. It allows us to link in out assets from other sources. So if somebody's working with us today and we manage a portion of their account, but yet they have money at their 401k because they still work at the company, we're able to network all that together to see the full picture. And it's not uncommon. We meet with clients and we're giving them help on those assets as well, just to, again, provide education and support across their entire financial picture.
You said how one of the main reasons you want to establish what are you stewarding, what do you own, is to give it a goal and also establish some risk and return properties. Talk about, again, you already mentioned that, but expound upon that just a little bit and maybe let that flow into what question number two is.
Well, yeah, Jared, I think many times there's questions beneath the question, right? So yes, it is a simple 3-step question process, but underneath this question is more developed questions as well. So in this case, I'll say, well, what are we actually stewarding? Okay, so that's the big question. But I want to get a little more detailed then and say, again, have you developed specific goals for each of those assets? Another one would be, would you be okay if you took the least amount of risk possible, but you were able to accomplish all of your financial goals, right? I ask questions like, do you have regrets with your personal finances? It's a great way to get down to, what somebody has done wrong in the past, things they wish they'd done differently, get at the psychology of how we feel about our money or our wealth as well. So, there's a ton of very detailed questions that we'll get into in those discussions. But really at the heart of all of that is I want every client to understand everything that they're stewarding, right? And have a goal specifically for each asset, right? So that's where we always start.
Yeah. Anything else you want to talk about when it comes to what are you stewarding, or should we move on to question number two?
I think probably the question that doesn't get talked about enough on each of these that I've found is this last one. Do you and your spouse understand the overall financial picture? And have you discussed the long-term goals for your wealth? And I think what I've found is there's oftentimes a money spouse and a non-money spouse, if you will. And I'm okay if not both spouses are at every single meeting all the time. I get it. A financial professional like myself, we can get not boring meetings, but sometimes people are like, yeah, I just don't want to go see that person. I think it's extremely important that both husband and wife, regardless of who's the financial mind of the couple, are at most of our meetings. And a primary reason for that is I've been alongside families when you go through a loss and when you see, husband passed away and he was always the financial one. Now I've got to rebuild trust with wife, and I've got to rebuild education. I've got to help again develop that level of trust in a time when that's the last thing you want to do. So again, I think it's important that at least some of those meetings, I've got both husband and wife, both the financial and non-financial spouse, depending on which one is in your family, but more involvement and more communication between spouses on what you're stewarding is very, very important.
Yeah. So the first question is, what are you stewarding? Obviously, there's some sub questions under that, but the whole idea with that particular question is to really get a firm foundation as to what it is that you are stewarding, what you own, and also getting down on paper, what do you want to do with that money, making sure everybody's on the same page. And I think that's a really important place to start. Ben, what's question number two?
Well, second question is, how much is enough now and in the future? Okay. So what I'm really after there is developing, if the first question of what am I stewarding, I'm trying to develop a capital allocation plan. The second question is, how much is enough now and in the future? And what I'm trying to build there is an income plan. And something I think too many people don't fully understand is just how important consistent regular income is for people, especially coming into retirement. Many times people have a hard time transitioning from earning that regular paycheck, and then it's gone and they're trying to then dip into their retirement savings. Part of our work is to help them even just mentally understand the difference between wealth and income. So if everything we've been talked about so far in capital allocation, what do I steward? That's all the wealth, right? Once it's money on a piece of paper and you can see a statement, that's more considered, this is the wealth. This is what I've been saving. I want to make sure that each client has specific regular income coming in retirement. So that involves income sources from really all different areas.
Mm-hmm. Well, a couple of things I want to ask you about, but one has to do with, again, really breaking down this idea of wealth versus income. You spend an entire chapter in your book Repurpose just talking about that specifically, but also too, I want to talk about this question really gets down to the heart, and then really, really leads well into the third question, which we're not going to get to yet. But you have to really kind of, I don't want to say put some boundaries, but put some, kind of put some boundaries on it. Where do you want to start with this plethora of questions here?
Well, you gave me like three, but I think the boundaries thing is worth talking about, Jared. And when I say how much is enough, sometimes people hear me say that, and it's like, are you trying to set a budget for me? Are you trying to budget? I've had a budget my entire life because financial people have said, you gotta save more. You've got to be able to figure out everything that's coming in, and then there's something left over, right? Versus what's coming in, what's being spent, and I should be saving that for the future. And this is kind of just the opposite for retirees. I look at the boundaries, if you will, the budget around some a retiree as being giving them more opportunity to spend and give, right? One of the hardest money concepts for people to realize is that if you've been saving your entire life, you have to transition into more of a somebody who's no longer saving. Many people that I work with have a hard time with that, Jared, because what happens is they're conditioned. They've seen their parents save. They have been a saver. They've always live on less than what they that comes in. That's why they're successful. Now they're actually being moved into an income, really where they're using that wealth to create the income. And I think that's something that too many people don't fully understand. In fact, I would say if there's any problem I see with clients is I don't think they fully understand how much that they can spend, how much that they can give to charity, because that is really on us to help them see the long term of what's coming in regularly from Social Security and other assets, what portfolio income that we've designed, and they don't fully understand that there will be a bunch left. And if that's their goal, that's okay. But many of them, it's not their goal. So that means we're doing something wrong.
Yeah. And again, it gets down to that heart level where, people have saved and they've created a sizable nest egg so they can retire. They can take work out of the life equation, so to speak. And it should be liberating. It should be freeing. And as you mentioned, kind of one of those worst case scenarios is where somebody indeed has enough and then their quality of life goes down because of almost the mental, the mental side, the emotional side of now trying to turn from a saver into a spender. They can't make that chasm, and their quality of life essentially goes down, and they're more worried about their money than ever. And that's what we're trying to eliminate here.
Yeah, if you're not, I've found that if I don't put those boundaries around, like, here's how much we're going to spend, here's how much, and by the way, the client comes up with that. It's like, okay, paint the picture of your ideal retirement. What is it going to take now and in the future? We'll add inflation and we'll do all of our planning for you. But ultimately, it's okay, here's what we want our life to look like. It's really my job to then show them and get them comfortable with the income, right? And what usually happens is when we put that boundary around them, they actually get close to that boundary. We've talked about this before. There's a study done, and we talked about on the podcast, but there's a study done on kids in playgrounds, and they found that when there was no fence or boundary around the playground, the kids would huddle up near the play equipment in the center. They would all kind of stay gathered together in the center, right? But once the boundary was created and there was a fence around the playground, kids would feel more free to go towards the edges of that. That's kind of what we're doing here. We've created a budget so people do go outside of what they normally found was their comfort level. Inside this their little boundary, we expand it so they can see, oh, I can start to give to, more to charity. I can take the trip that I never thought I should. Many of you that have met with me in the past, you'll say things like, Ben's always trying to get me to spend my money. And I guess it's not that I'm pushing you to spend your money. It's I want to make sure you feel comfortable doing that, because the last thing I want to do is get to that end of life scenario and have somebody say, because we do tend to, if there's anything that we regret, it's almost always the thing we did not do. It's rarely do I hear. I've had the opportunity, to walk with clients towards the end of their lives. I've been doing this a long time. And I remember hearing that conversation many times, like, I wish I had done this. I wish I had done that. It's not ever, I wish I hadn't done this or that. So we're trying to make sure that with a well-designed, confident income plan, clients expand to those boundaries, right? And they do more while they can enjoy doing it.
Yeah, it's it's not kind of, it is a very much a win-win scenario, but also it does speak to that heart level, because if you don't have those boundaries, fear can come into play. I think, we'd all agree one of the biggest fears you have in retirement, besides, a health crisis or something like that, would be running out of money. I mean, we hear that all the time, and that's the reason why the very first question retirement planners typically get is, how much do I need so I don't run out, type of thing. But when you give them a clear plan to say, this is how much you need, it's all been allocated. You can see it here on paper. We have the tools to assess this and map it out for you. Then instead of having fear and scarcity, you have freedom and liberation. And that's the whole process in life that we're trying to encourage people to walk into.
Yeah. And again, it comes back to focusing more on your income. I look at, if you look at money, and there's two sides to the coin. There's the wealth side and the income side. Look at money that way. So, okay, typically what I've found is wealth can actually drive more discontentment. It can drive more fear. It can drive more, of just concern versus income. I've never seen anybody have a hard time spending their Social Security check. People that are fortunate to have a pension payment, they don't care about the pension guarantee fund. They don't care about what's in the fund. They don't, what they care about is the useful side of money, which is income, because it comes consistently regular and they're able to spend that. It's the easiest money people can spend. It's different when you have to go and call and ask permission to get money from an account or feel as if you're withdrawing from a wealth type situation. So again, we want to make sure it's regular, consistent. If I look at, this is getting down to the heart level and maybe almost to spiritual for today's call, but I think sometimes, certainly in our culture today, we end up putting the wealth side of the equation almost on a pedestal. It becomes a god. It becomes a replacement of where we should find our value of what's most important. So I think as just a cautionary tale, money, when you look at it as the means. Look at it as the thing that will allow you to do more, experience more, not necessarily, never as the end. It should always be the means. It should never be the end goal.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And again, that's why I really like this question, because it does really put your heart posture in the spotlight, so to speak. But also, this question is a great segue from the first question. So once we have a really solid idea as to what it is that we are stewarding, we understand the risk involved, and is it more of safe investments, not so safe, whatever, however you want to categorize those, and then coming up with an income plan based on those assets. Again, it's a great flow chart in really developing this particular plan.
It is, Jared, and there's the minutia again, the background behind this is we're going to look at each of those assets and decide, what's the best from an income tax standpoint, income to come in and when, right? We're looking at maximizing tax brackets. We're looking at all of these things behind the scenes. But ultimately, it boils down to, from a client perspective, is what do I have, right? What am I stewarding? How much is enough for me to spend now and in the future, right? And then you kind of drill that down first and foremost.
Yeah. So again, the first question is, what is it that you're stewarding? Second question is, how much is enough for you and in the future? Ben, what's the third question?
Well, before I get to that, I kind of want to highlight a couple sub questions underneath there too, because I want to get you guys thinking, like, what would a meeting with us look like if you went through that? And what I love to do is kind of, sub question it, drill down a little further at this. So one of the things I love to ask people is, do you know where your income's coming from each month? Is it guaranteed in the same time each month? Where most people are used to, unless you're self-employed, of course, we've got some volatility in our income, but a lot of people are used to regular, consistent money coming in at the same time. So I think that's important. Another one is, in the last month, what was something enjoyable your income allowed you to do? So again, that gets you thinking more, oh yeah, what has provided me more joy, what has provided me more use has been income. So you can start thinking about, yeah, I was able to take that trip or bless somebody with a gift or whatever that is through the income that I had.
Well, that will do it for this week's episode. We'll have part 2 coming up next week. But in the meantime, if you want to hear more about the retirement plans that we offer here at Taatjes Financial Group, please visit our website, taatjesfinancial.com. We'll see you next time.
Securities offered through Avantax Investment Services. Member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Avantax Advisory Services. Insurance services offered through an Avantax affiliated insurance agency.